Welcome to Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. Andy Behrens, Matt Harmon, Tera Roberts. I'm Jason Fitz. For the next hour, we will get you caught up on every single piece of breaking news you need to make sure that you win today, because that's what it's all about. The turkey is set in. Now everybody's got that joy down in the heart. The Christmas spirit is going. Andy Behrens, how are we feeling today? Like, turkey coma's over. We got Christmas music blasting. I can only hope that you are feeling the joy.
Oh man, I'm feeling so good. I got 2 Sam Laporta touchdowns already in the bank. I got a new head coach for my real life team. Life is good. It was a good Thanksgiving.
Tera, I get the joy that he feels when he talks about tight ends is a little weird. How we doing, Tera?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. No, hey, we're all feeling good here. He got his new head coach. I got a Packers win, so it's a NFC North fiesta here. We're very thankful on Thanksgiving.
And he got a new coach. Tera got a win. I got my heart ripped out and stomped all over me on Black Friday. It's fine. I don't want to talk about it. It's fine. Matt Harmon, make me feel better. Don't be the Grinch here, brother. What do we got?
You just don't throw me the hard questions. Make you feel good about the Raiders. I got nothing for you on that, buddy. I mean, they almost won. You almost had a Black Friday miracle, so maybe you can almost feel good, Fitz.
You know what? I love the way you pose that. Look, it's a challenging day for everybody because, let's be honest, there's already some games in the books. Thanksgiving, Black Friday, which we will not mention again if I can avoid it. And obviously, we got a full slate of games today. So you guys can get involved. Use the hashtag AskFFL. I've got the chat up in front of me. We'll be taking a look at that. Scott Pianowski will be taking all your social questions on Twitter X right now. And we're going to make sure that we get as many of your questions in as we can. So hit us up in the YouTube chat. We will get there. In the meantime, let's get you to the actives, inactives. I know that's what you got to know early on. And some early news here. Breece Hall, active. Trevor Lawrence, active. Josh Downs, inactive with the shoulder injury. J.K. Dobbins, injured reserve with the knee injury. That's from the early slate of games. Some big news on the late games. We've got Devonta Smith, questionable, may work out, but not a lot of optimism there. Brock Purdy is expected to play, which is great. Cedric Tillman is out, is still in concussion protocol. So you get that answer early on the Monday night game. Let's take a look at some top fantasy storylines for the rest of Lucky Week 13. Matt, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I've got my eye on Jackson Smith-Njigba there in Seattle and whether he can keep up this recent hot streak, because he hasn't just been good lately. He has been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL from a production standpoint. JSN is second in yards per route run among wide receivers with 100-plus routes since week 8. He's sandwiched between A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua, 2 guys that were going off the board in the first round of basically every fantasy draft when they were healthy this offseason. JSN's a great example of a player that right now, again, if he can keep this up, he looks like a player that is the classic, you can be right and wrong about a player over the course of one season. Because if you were like me and you were really hoping he could take that second-year leap and maybe even become the leading wide receiver in Seattle, you weren't feeling so great when he was wide receiver 39 in weeks 1 to 7. Well, again, in that same span that we're talking about here, he is the wide receiver 3 overall in points per game. And to me, watching this Seahawks offense, I think things just feel a little smoother when he's the top target because he gives you so much instant separation ability in the short and intermediate area for a quarterback who's been under pressure and in chaos all season long. Again, I feel like him as that designed target player just smooths out the entire offensive operation. So I'd love to see him keep it up. I think he's capable of keeping it up. And again, he looks like he's right now having that classic second-year breakout season.
All right, Tera, give me your top fantasy storyline for week 13.
I've been very into talking about the young quarterbacks here, and I think it's time we give some props to Bryce Young here. He hasn't turned into one of the league's top quarterbacks, but he has clearly made drastic improvements, both visually and statistically. Now, by no means do I agree with the way that Carolina handled actually sitting him, but since his return, Bryce Young has had 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions in 4 starts. He has posted a minimum of 11 fantasy points per game. It doesn't feel impressive, but that is a solid floor considering that he has actually had a pretty tough schedule here. He has shown borderline QB1 upside. We saw it last week against Kansas City. And then this week, he gets what could easily and should easily be his best matchup of the season against Tampa Bay. This could finally be the season where we see that kind of breakout, defining performance from Bryce Young, giving his best performance of the year here.
All right, Andy Behrens, your top fantasy storyline this week is?
Yeah, I'm looking at Arizona and Minnesota, really a consequential game. And Kyler Murray, he is right there on the fringes of the top 10, top 12 fantasy quarterbacks on the season. But it's been such a bumpy ride, Fitz. He's just about as every other week as it can possibly get. He sandwiches these huge games between fantasy duds. Murray has 5 games this year with over 20 fantasy points in Yahoo default scoring, and he's usually way over. And then he has 5 games under 15 points, and he is often way under. He very rarely just has a simple, standard issue, useful, normal game. Arizona's offense is obviously too big to fail in fantasy. Murray is an every week starter. So is James Conner. So is Harrison, McBride. It's just been a journey for all these guys. The Cards, again, they get the Vikings this week. That's an opportunistic defense that will also allow plenty of yards and fantasy production. So after Minnesota, it's an ostensibly friendly closing schedule for Arizona. They get the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Panthers, the Rams. Ideally, this week would be the beginning of a month and a half of consistent quality performance from Murray and friends. Let's keep the ceiling high and maybe lift the floor a little bit. Either way, Murray needs a bounce back in a challenging spot.
I love your optimism. I'm still jarred by what we saw last week from that Arizona offense. All right. My top fantasy storyline has to do with the top game of the day and a game we're going to talk more about in just a little bit. But realistically, there are 2 very real MVP candidates playing against each other today. When we're talking about Saquon and we're talking about Derrick Henry, you have to remember that a little of this is strength on strength. As Tara pointed out a few weeks ago and is a smart part of this conversation, certainly as bad as the Ravens defense has been at times, their ability to shut down quality running backs, their defensive line has played better than they get credit for. So I don't think it's a given that they're just going to be able to turn around and be run on through this process. But I don't know how you stop Saquon, and I don't know how you stop Derrick Henry. What I do know is taking on these 2 defenses, particularly right now, I do believe an MVP comes out of this, and we get a little bit better sense if you're simply plug and play for the rest of the year, no matter the matchup for both of these guys. All right, before we move on, Harmon mentioned JSN today against the Jets. Obviously, a lot of conversation already in the chat. Jeff has asked Emperor Harmon. I don't know if that's like Emperor, like Star Wars Emperor. I don't know if that's just like Emperor leader of the free world, but Emperor Harmon, wide receiver overload, sit 1, JSN, Lad, BTJ. What do you got, Harmon?
Oh, geez. Yeah, 3 pretty great options there. I think Brian Thomas Jr., even with Trevor Lawrence, is going to be the guy that I sit here just because I don't know how healthy Lawrence is. It's obviously a chaotic situation there in Jacksonville. And you just look from a volume perspective, Brian Thomas Jr. is still under 20% target share over the course of the entire season. So if I was the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'd be doing a lot of things differently. If I was Emperor Palpatine, I'd probably be doing a lot of things differently too. But that's a conversation for another show. We will get to that at some point later on here, maybe the Week 17 edition of this program. But if I was the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'd be doing something different. I'd be throwing the ball a lot more to Brian Thomas, but they're not. Meanwhile, the Seahawks are featuring JSN. The Chargers are featuring Ladd McConkey. So those are the 2 guys that I would go with there.
You're obviously the Emperor. I always wanted to be Han Solo. We'll let the other 2 figure out which ones they're going to be throughout the course of the show. All right, last minute pickups. Players that you can add right now that are out there. Let's take a look at some last minute pickups that could help you win today. Harmon, we'll stick with you for a second. Give us a last minute pickup, Emperor.
Yeah, Fitzy, I see you as more of a C-3PO guy, but again, we'll touch on that at a different time in the program.
Probably true.
I'm going to go with Gus Edwards here, who's only 17% rostered in Yahoo leagues, which is pretty shocking for a guy that's in our top 30 in the rankings this week. And listen, we saw it up at the top. J.K. Dobbins is on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks. And I don't know that Gus Edwards is like the sexiest running back in the world here. Like, he's not a high upside play. I know there's a lot of people that are very intrigued about Kimani Vidal and maybe some of the more explosive backs on that roster. But right now, going into this game, I would consider Gus Edwards the favorite to lead the team in carries. I'd consider him the favorite as the goal line option. And this is a Chargers offense that is on the upswing in a pretty decent spot this week against the Falcons defense that can't really do anything well. So yeah, Gus Edwards is one of these. We haven't had very many of them, but he's one of these running backs you can pick up right off the waiver wire and probably pluck into your RB3 spot.
The fact that you connotated that with the sexiest means every time I see him do anything today, I'm going to think sexy back. Andy, give us somebody out there that's a last minute pickup for you.
Yeah, look, Tank Bigsby has his shortcomings as a fantasy running back, which of course is the reason that he's eligible for this segment, and he's rostered in fewer than 50% of Yahoo leagues. He's coming back from an ankle injury, and he's only caught 3 passes all season, so game script can effectively eliminate him. On the flip side, Bigsby is the best rushing option on Jacksonville's roster and by orders of magnitude. For however long the run is in play in any given week, he is clearly the team's best early down runner. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry for the Jags this year, which is 1.5 yards better than Travis Etienne. And he's been at the top of the yards after contact leaderboard all season long. Bigsby has simply been great, not merely good. He's been great this year. His team is an underdog to Houston this week, sure, but only by 3.5 points. And the Texans haven't really been blowing opponents out of the water either. Houston's a first place team, but their full season point differential is just plus 17. So Bigsby should have a significant role throughout today's game. He's simply been a much, much better ball carrier than Etienne. If you've got Etienne on a roster, I don't need to tell you that. If you need a desperation flex, you can do a lot worse than Tank Bigsby. He's one of the most efficient runners in the game.
Tara, give me what you got on the last minute pickup.
The guys gave you 2 excellent running backs. I'm going to give you a wide receiver in Devon Vele. Cortland Sutton is obviously the wide receiver 1 in Denver, but Bo Nix has been strong enough to support a secondary option, and Devon Vele has separated himself from the rest of the receiving core over the past 3 weeks. Vele has seen a good uptick in snaps, seeing over 60% each week, and he has been second on the team in targets and has averaged 10 fantasy points per game, and he has clearly earned the respect and trust of both Bo Nix and Sean Payton with an impressive 78% catch rate. Now he faces a Cleveland defense that is very vulnerable against the pass. He has an excellent floor and very solid upside given the matchup here. You can absolutely pick up Devon Vele, and he is available on waivers.
All right, we're going to give Tara and Andy a second. They're going to be able to figure out what Star Wars characters they would be. I'm still going to fight for Han Solo, and we'll get to make your pick. Matt Harmon, help some of our fabulous users out there figure out exactly who they should get in on making some picks. The first question comes in from Steven, and Steven asks you, PPR league running backs, Harris or Connor? Wide receivers, London, Evans, Sutton. What do you think?
Ooh, 3 great options at wide receiver. So let's pause on that and stick with the running backs here. Man, James Conner coming off a big payday. That's great to see. They're invested in him. Obviously, he's been one of the better backs in the league this year. But I think I'm gonna opt to. Yeah, you know what? I'll stick with James Conner. It's a tough one, but I think I'm gonna go with James Conner there. The Vikings' run defense is good overall. Statistically, they're good, but I do think you can get them on some of the more power gap concepts. You've seen that sometimes when you watch them on film a little bit this year. From the wide receiver standpoint, shoot, like, you don't have a bad option here, but I'm probably going to default to Drake London against a Chargers defense that plays a bunch of zone coverage, which should be like some options there for Drake London over the middle of the field to be the top targeted player. If you can start 2, I'm probably going with Mike Evans over Cortland Sutton. All
right, we'll get the next question coming in from Sammy. Sammy asks, Herbert or Daniels, Harrison Jr. or Wilson, non-PPR? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go. Oh, tough one here. It's the quarterback position as well, but I'm going with Justin Herbert on this one. Yeah, I know Jaden Daniels took off running last week. That was great to see. Really the first time we've seen him as a rushing threat since he had that rib injury, but this is just such a cakewalk matchup for Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense against a Falcons defense that probably hasn't pressured the quarterback since I've been alive on planet Earth. So I do think that is a good time for Justin Herbert to have a big fantasy performance. At the wide receiver position, I know there's some talk that, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the featured player in the game plan. Jonathan Gannon's been talking about that this morning. They're going to run things through him. I'll believe it when I see it because they haven't done it all year. So I'm probably going to default to Garrett Wilson, which feels gross because everything Jets-wise feels gross. But he would be my pick here at the wide receiver position.
I can't believe how far the Jets have fallen that's the statement, but you're right. All right, Scott Pumper comes in. Half PPR, Stevenson or Gus in flex, and Debo or Vele at wide receiver. Ask FFL. I ask you, Emperor, what do you think?
Oh, baby, talk about how the mighty have fallen here for Debo Samuel to be up against Devon Vele. And I kind of think Vele might be the answer. But I'm going to go with Debo here. I'll give it one more shot with Debo on this one. The reality is this is a zone-heavy defense in Buffalo. Those are typically the spots where Debo would go off. So I'll give it one more shot with Debo there just because I think Vele could have a 3 to 4 target game, and you can't be too surprised by that. And then I will go Gus Edwards over Ramondre Stevenson at the running back position. This is just a more high-powered offense. Obviously, we're stacking up the Chargers versus the Patriots, and I do think he's the favorite for goal line work. And this is a spot where the Chargers should be ahead, so I'll go with LA there.
All right, we'll get another question in. This one coming from Alex on Twitter, who says, stuck on to flex options. K9, Kenneth Walker III, Devontae Adams, James Cook, Calvin Ridley. What do you got?
Yeah, maybe I have to hand in the reception perception tag here, but I think I'm going with the two backs on this one, Kenneth Walker and James Cook. It does feel like we're always looking for the big Kenneth Walker game, or at least I know I've personally been looking for it recently, and it's been kind of hit or miss. But I do think it's a good matchup against a Jets defense that feels like they packed it in for the season about a month ago. Maybe when they fired their head coach in like week 5, bit of a curious move looking back in it. So obviously then James Cook, the other one, he clearly stands out as the best play among these four. So I'll go with the two running backs there.
All right, we'll get one in from the YouTube chat just because it has a great name. Gabba 12, which also raises the question, were there 11 other Gabba I don't know. Anyway, here's the question. Half PPR. Probably. I need to decide between Shakir versus Jennings for wide receiver slot and Shakir, Jennings, Harris, or Kittle for flex. I have McConkey and I have Williams Hubbard as my running backs. So Shakir versus Jennings for wide receiver slot, Shakir, Jennings, Harris, or Kittle for flex.
I think I'm going to go with both of the Niners in this one. Juwan Jennings, I do think, should be ranked ahead of Debo at this point. He's just been the better player. He's been getting the better volume. This is another spot where you think about those in-breaking routes and out-breaking routes for Juwan Jennings against zone coverage in the intermediate area. With Brock Purdy back, I think you can play Juwan Jennings. Feels a little weird to double up on the Niners here, but how do you have a better tight end option than George Kittle? I guess maybe you landed on Brock Bowers, but I do think Kittle is probably the favorite there to lead the team in targets and probably receiving production as well.
I just want to say, Gabba one more time. Okay, fine. Now we'll throw it over to the adults in the room. Andy, Tara, time for some make believe.
No pressure. Not sure that I'm really the adult in the room. But yeah, it's time for a little make-believe or make-believe in which we sort the frauds from the stars. Tara, why don't you get us started? What or who are we either believing or disbelieving this week?
I'm going to defend a star here and start us off with a little bit of make-believe on Justin Jefferson panic. It is very difficult to panic over a player like Justin Jefferson, but over the past several weeks, fantasy managers have been able to make a pretty solid case here. Jefferson has averaged just 5 fantasy points per game over the past 3 outings, and while he's struggling, the rest of the Vikings offense is thriving. Literally everyone. Meanwhile, poor Justin Jefferson has just been left out in the cold. But here's why I think it's make-believe. This slump here, it's temporary. There is nothing wrong with Jefferson, and Sam Darnold bounced back after his own struggles, so that's not the issue. Jefferson is just facing a really tough stretch of secondaries that have chosen to focus on him. He is still one of the league's top receivers and an excellent bounce-back candidate this week against Arizona and next week in particular against Atlanta. We are not believing in the downturn of Justin Jefferson here.
Yeah, I love that call. He actually had a huge play called back last week, too. So he's been very, very close. I'm going to give you something to believe in here. And I'm kind of bumping up against that fine line between analysis and wish casting a little bit because I need Jameis Winston to keep rolling. I recognize the difficulty of the Denver matchup this week, of course. We probably aren't leaning on Jameis anywhere outside of super flex leagues or especially deep leagues in this one. And yes, I recognize that we are always going to get maybe 2 or 3 regrettable throws each week from Jameis, regardless of the opponent. It's part of his charm. But here's what I love. Cleveland has fully given him the green light. He's averaging 40 pass attempts per game as the starter. And that volume isn't skewed by any single game performance. He's actually topped 40 attempts in 3 of 4 games. Also, he is certainly not dinking and dunking. That is not his style. Winston has an ADOT of 10.9. That is the second highest of any starting QB this season, behind only Anthony Richardson. So Winston is giving us 40 attempts per week of the high-yield, high-risk variety, and we should love him for it. He's transformed Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore into startable fantasy assets. Guys, we will definitely be playing next week when we have 6 teams on bye. Also, by the way, Jameis is pretty good for business for opposing defenses too. So everybody eats with Winston at quarterback. Okay, give me one more thing to believe or disbelieve.
I do love that, Andy, because I too am relying on Jameis Winston in Superflex and the Scott Fish Bowl. So I truly I truly am believing with you. We're also going to believe here in the Houston defense, getting back on track here. Heading into the season, we expected the Houston defense to build off of 2023 and be a tough defensive matchup. Instead, they have struggled with inconsistency, and it's really been tough to pinpoint exactly what they have been strong against and vulnerable against because of these inconsistencies. But over the past 3 weeks, they are starting to look more like themselves. They have gotten healthier. They have finished as a top 10 defense in each of the past 3 weeks, including 2 19 fantasy point performances in each of the last 2 games. That said, those matchups were against Dallas and Tennessee, but I do want you to still believe here. They'll have a chance to prove themselves this week against Jacksonville. Jacksonville obviously is getting Trevor Lawrence back, a huge return and boost for that Jacksonville offense. But some turnovers can still happen in this game here. I think we gotta get a strong performance here, a strong top 10, potential top 5 finish for the Houston defense again here this week.
I love that call. Trevor Lawrence is always going to give you a couple of opportunities. So good call by you. Let's send it back now to Fitz and get everybody back in the game.
The whole gang is back together, and we turn to our fantasy game changers for this week, powered by Ram Trucks, where we're identifying some of the most impactful players in one of the top fantasy matchups on the schedule. Sunday Night Football, just a couple of flakes. 49ers and Bills in blustery Buffalo. This game, look, San Francisco 5-6 season has gone off the rails. Buffalo 9-2. The Bills favored by 6. The over/under on this 44.5. And according to multiple reports, Bills fans were being asked to come help shovel out the stadium, which just feels gross for San Francisco to have to deal with on a Sunday night. So, fantasy game changer, Matt Harmon, who you got your eye on?
Yeah, I'll go with Khalil Shakir here for a couple of reasons. One, you mentioned the weather, all that snow. Shakir has a 3.8 average depth of target this season, which makes his over 10 yards per reception a near miracle. I mean, typically you're getting that few air yards on your targets. You are not necessarily then going to be one of the more efficient wide receivers in the league from a yards per route run standpoint, especially when you run the most routes on the team. And that is exactly what Khalil Shakir has done from a wide receiver position standpoint. He's been so dynamic after the catch. He feels like a player that even if the downfield passing is limited in this game, they're going to still have to funnel a lot of stuff to him underneath. I will say, though, one thing I definitely have my eye on from Shakir's usage standpoint is that we've seen him have some of his biggest games recently. Those have also coincided with Dalton Kincaid being out. Obviously, Amari Cooper still being onboarded and being on and off the field due to injuries. Keon Coleman being out. I just wonder if we see Shakir maybe take a step back in maybe not this game because of the weather, but in different games because some of these other guys are coming back. Me personally, I would like to not see that. I do think he's such a good player. He's their most consistent option, but that is at least something to keep your eye on with the Buffalo Bills coming out of their bye week this week to face the 49ers.
All right, Tera, your fantasy game changer in this one is
Christian McCaffrey. My fantasy managers have been patiently awaiting the return of Christian McCaffrey, and while the return has been very welcome, it's been underwhelming over the past 3 games. Since his return, he has yet to score a touchdown. His carries have been a little bit inconsistent. The rush volume has been inconsistent as well, below 40 yards in 2 of the past 3 games. Just a borderline RB1 finish, despite all favorable matchups there. But this week, and why he is a game changer, is because this is the week that Christian McCaffrey reclaims that game changer status with a strong overall potential RB1 finish this week in a matchup where the weather is going to be an issue. They can rely on the ground game. Buffalo's secondary has been stronger and they've been more vulnerable against the run. It is the perfect setup here. Brock Purdy has been dealing with an injury here. The 49ers are in desperation mode. They have to lean on Christian McCaffrey. This is the perfect bounce back opportunity for him here.
All right, Andy Behrens, your fantasy game changer.
Oh, it's James Cook. Weather conditions probably going to favor the run in Buffalo. It's bad when we're discussing snow in feet and not inches. So we can assume another useful game is ahead for James Cook. He's up to 11 touchdowns now on the year, 10 of them on the ground. So much for the worries that Josh Allen's rushing was going to cap Cook's touchdown potential. Also, he's caught 5 passes in 2 of his last 3 games. So workload is flowing his way regardless of game situation. Game situation should be favorable in this one. You mentioned it. They're a 6-point favorite in this thing. Cook has simply been one of the most bankable players in fantasy this year. He's about to face a Niners defense that has been not quite as advertised. San Francisco has given up 16 rushing scores on the season. That's the 3rd highest total in the league. Josh Jacobs just got him. Kenneth Walker did before that. Bucky Irving did before that, right? So a string of very good performances against the Niners. Cook is just a very good bet to reach the end zone again and produce yet another top 10 finish.
All right, Dylan Gomez is asked in the YouTube chat, and I love this because it integrates a couple of players we just talked about. Full PPR, who do I start? CMC, Breece Hall, Cook, or Pollard? I will go to Harmon on this one because Harmon has the only person that wasn't involved. So now you can create a total argument between Tara and Andy, and I'm just stirring it up, Harmon. Who do you got? CMC, Hall, Cook, Pollard.
I think I'm gonna go with CMC there. I buy Tara's narrative on this one. The run game is back. They need Christian McCaffrey to get going. I think McCaffrey's looked fine so far since being back. Certainly maybe like 85-90% of his usual self. But yeah, I think Tara made the more compelling argument than Andy on that one.
The breaking news here is that Matt Harmon has just said that he thinks Andy Behrens is a total fraud and he doesn't respect him. That's all I heard out of that take.
Yeah.
That's all right, let's get to some questions from all you guys. The chat is just fired up. We'll get a bunch of them in here. Hurry up offense. You know what we do. We put 25 seconds on the clock, and then we get as many of your questions in as we can. Brendan says, fantasy football people need your input on probably my biggest start-sit decision of the season. High-stakes guillotine league, if you're familiar. Start Pickens at Cincinnati or Evans at Carolina. Already starting Bucky Irving, if that matters at all. God, that's a lot. Andy Behrens, what do you got?
Oh, this is so close because, they both have favorable matchups. They are similar players, too, right? Downfield threats. I'm gonna lean Evans.
I like that. And by the way, I don't fault you for going through the whistle on that. It was a long question. Christopher with the next question says, PPR sit one, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, or Hawkinson. What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, this is one where I'm probably going to go to sit Garrett Wilson on this one. Look, I mean, TJ Hawkinson's role has been fantastic. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Drake London's going to get peppered with targets against a zone-heavy defense over the middle of the field. So I think Wilson in that hideous Jet situation is your sit.
All right. Well done getting that in time. All right. The next one comes from Rob, who says, big dilemma here. Stroud at Jacksonville or Herbert at Atlanta? A lot of question marks. Ask FFL. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of question marks. Good matchups here for both of these guys. I love this as a potential massive bounce back breakout game for CJ Stroud. Getting back on track with Nico Collins here. It feels like they're right on the cusp. So I actually lean CJ Stroud as the guy with the higher upside here in a good matchup.
Andy Behrens, you get the next one coming in from Jimmy, who says, ask FFL, flex, half PPR, Tank Dell, Rashad White, or Quentin Johnston. What do you think?
Wow, well, I can eliminate Quentin Johnston. I'm especially after last week, I don't know how you can go back to him. Very close with Dell and White, but I'm going to go Rashad White on the basis of the matchup. Super friendly spot against Carolina.
Perfect. I'm going to get to the YouTube chat, and this guy's going to get in because A, he mentions me, and B, mentions the sponsor. Zendog Jeff says, hey, Fitz, love this show, and I just popped a beer. Attaboy. Half PPR. Ramondre at home versus Indy. Connor at Minnesota. Otten at the Panthers. Or Njoku at Denver. Ask FFL powered by Ram. Harmon, give him some love. What do we got?
Yeah, I think James Conner stands out as the best option there to me. I know he's coming off a little bit of a slower game. The whole Cardinals offense does as well, but yeah, that's my answer.
I love that. By the way, I got to figure out if I can pop a non-alcoholic beer in the middle of the show. Okay, X34, next one it's non-alcoholic. All right, the next question from YouTube, Taysom Hill, Thielen, or Ridley at my flex, please, and thank you. God, I love how polite that is. Tara, what do you think?
Oh, man, Taysom Hill's upside is so strong, but I think Ridley is the one that I would go with. I like the matchup here. Will Levis has had a good connection with him, so I, oddly enough, do lean towards Calvin Ridley for a big game here.
All right, let's get back to the next question from Casey Anderson. Casey Anderson says, hashtag ask FFL, half PPR, tight end, no Kincaid, Fitz or Ertz? Well, we'll go to our tight end expert on this one, Andy.
Yeah, well, I don't have an Iowa tight end to choose from here, so I'm sort of lost in the wilderness. I would lean Fitz here. It's really close, and I know Ertz has been a scorer the last couple weeks, found the end zone. Still, this is going to be Kyle Pitts for me, just based on volume and ceiling.
Man, if you'd gotten that answer a little faster, you could have used your time to make your point for Iowa making the college football playoff. GPYT, I don't know what the next question. I don't know what the name is, but I'll just say this. Ask FFL, do I start Mooney or Devontae Adams? That's the next question. Do I start Mooney or Devontae Adams? Harmon.
Now I have to actually prepare an answer for this. Yeah, I'm going to go with Darnell Mooney on this one. I'm a little nervous about this Chargers defense versus the Falcons offense, but I'm nervous about everything surrounding the New York Jets right now, so I'll go Mooney here.
We are only halfway through the greatness of what we're about to bring you. But in the meantime, all the conversation I mentioned earlier about MVPs, Saquon as an MVP candidate came up on our great show, McCoy and Van Noy, with Charles McDonald joining the guys. Check a little of this out.
I know we've been watching Lamar, and he's a front runner. But are we not giving Saquon enough love for being MVP right now?
We should talk about it, at least. There's nowhere on the MVP award that's written out that says this is only an award for quarterbacks. You know, I know it's kind of become
we
that.
Gotta stop there, right?
It's not explicitly that. And if there was going to be a season where a running back should be in consideration, like, I feel like it would look like this, you know?
Like, we really need to take consideration of Saquon being the MVP. It's the most valuable player. I understand the value of quarterbacks, but when we're talking about to that particular team, what they can be and what they are, we got to take into account what Saquon is doing right now. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to do much. Hand the ball off to Saquon, dump the ball off to Saquon. Saquon is going insane. It's getting ridiculous. We need to have true consideration of Saquon being the MVP.
We also need to have consideration of Brock Bowers as Rookie of the Year. Look at who's hot from Thanksgiving already. Brock Bowers with 25.2 points in this one. Keenan Allen, 21.8. Rico Dowdle, 19.8. DJ Moore with 19.7. But for everything that's hot, there's also the not. And there are some players that had a tough weekend already. CeeDee Lamb with 4.9 points. That is not a misprint. Roma Dunze said, I can do worse than that. 3.5 for him. And Wan'Dale Robinson with 1.6 points. But let me ask you this, Andy Behrens. Is it time to panic on CeeDee Lamb? Is it time to just bench him?
Well, we just put him on a graphic with Wan'Dale Robinson and Roma Dunze, so that's not a great sign, right? That's not the company that we expect CeeDee Lamb to keep at this point. It was a terrible game, right? Like, only a couple catches in that one. I think you probably have to write it off as just a one-off situation with a player of CeeDee's caliber. In his previous 6 games, he had seen double-digit targets. As long as he's healthy, which is not a total guarantee right now, right? Because he's clearly hurting to some extent. But as long as he's healthy and he's active, I think you can feel panicky if you want, but I think you got to roll with him in most situations.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody that was banking on. It's a reminder of how little we know when we do the draft at the end of summer. We feel great about our teams. This year has just been a kick in the no-no places. All right, let's get to the game of the day. Eagles taking on the Ravens. The Ravens favored by 3 in this one. The over-under 51. Weather not really a big issue, and it's going to be 42 degrees, mostly cloudy. When you're looking at this game, Tara, what's the biggest storyline to you?
Yeah, we just talked about the MVP storyline here, but you know what I find interesting is this is Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson. Can Jalen Hurts actually turn this into his MVP moment? We've got this epic battle of fantasy overall QB1 Lamar Jackson and overall QB2 Jalen Hurts, both playoff teams, both leading great offenses, both with insane running backs. But if you look at the MVP odds, Jalen Hurts is lacking. He is way back in 7th place, fluctuating there. And Hurts has had a great season from a fantasy perspective, but he hasn't had that true MVP moment. This matchup, though, is a great opportunity against the reigning MVP, a very pass-friendly defense where we can finally actually see the Eagles push pass volume heavily, because that might be their best way to win this matchup here. So Hurts living off the tush push, 11 rushing touchdowns. Is this the opportunity for him to kind of challenge Lamar Jackson on those passing stats and show off here, get that little MVP moment for himself?
I love that angle. I'm going to go full Andy Behrens and take a look at a kicker here, because this one really concerns me, right? Justin Tucker is just not Justin Tucker this year. He's already missed 6 field goals. The most he's ever missed in any one season is 7, and there's plenty of time left in this season. Also, his conversion rate on kicks at this point is about 79%. 79% for a kicker that we've thought for years, if you got him in your fantasy lineup, set it, forget it. He's going to make a bunch of big kicks. He's going to make a bunch of long kicks. You're going to get some points out of him. Now, absolutely nothing is a given with Tucker. And in a game like this, where I think both defensive lines have the opportunity to really be disruptive, you need to be able to trust your kicker. I think that there's a trust issue with Justin Tucker, rightfully so, that changes the entire strategy. Tara just mentioned the tush push, which is such a huge part of why Philly's able to turn around and say, we're going to go for it every time on 4th and 1. If you're Baltimore, I don't know that you can be comfortable right now bringing Tucker out and asking him to kick long field goals, which changes their entire offensive strategy, changes their entire fantasy layout also. Matt Harmon, what do you got looking in this one?
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is a spot where Zay Flowers can get rolling. I think people might not realize that Flowers coming to this week was top 5 in the NFL in receiving yards at sub 800. By the way, that's a note on just receiver production is down overall this year. A bunch of guys were over 1,000 yards going into week 13 last year. This year, we do not have that many players that are having these monster receiving seasons. So Zay Flowers has been one of the more productive receivers in the NFL this year, but 3 straight games of under 65 yards, 2 of which were under 40 yards, even if you scored a touchdown in one of those. We haven't seen him necessarily have a big, massive impact on the game of late. And it's tough to decide if this is one of those spots too, because as I mentioned last week, this Eagles defense is legit and they do everything extremely well. Although I think it was telling last week that Puka Nacua, not Cooper Kupp, was the guy to get rolling here. One, just because of where those guys were, where they're at this point in their career, but also because Puka Nacua is the guy that they are moving around the formation. They're trying to be intentional in how they get him matchups. And certainly when you look at Bateman, Andrews, and Flowers, Flowers is the guy who moves around most of all. So if you're trying to tell yourself a story where this can be a big Zay Flowers impact on the game type of week, it has to be on some of these plays with pre-snap motion.
All right, so David in the YouTube chat asks, Otten, Flowers, or Pittman with downs out, 1 point PPR flex. What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, I think that's a spot where I'm going to Zay Flowers. I do like Pittman coming off a pretty nice performance against a Lions defense that plays a lot of man coverage. Pittman can beat man coverage. They're going against another rather man-heavy defense this week. No Josh Downs. I understand all that, but I just think the upside's a little bit higher with Zay Flowers here in this matchup.
Andy Behrens, what's your top storyline on this one?
Oh yeah, let the record show that when AJ Brown is active this season, the Eagles are 8-0. They are undefeated. Wins are a wide receiver stat, folks. Don't believe the media narratives about quarterbacks. Brown truly having an outrageous season. He's averaging a career best 90.9 receiving yards per game. He's gaining 18.6 yards per catch, hauling in nearly 70% of his targets. Also, he's leading the league in yards per route run with just an obnoxious 3.35. Anything near 3 is pretty rare air. So Brown's rate is just absolutely crazy. In many respects, this is actually his best season. Baltimore, of course, ranks next to last in the league against the pass, as we have discussed a time or two on this show previously. So this is just an obviously friendly spot for a receiver who is playing at an all-pro level. I don't know that the Devontae Smith injury is any sort of boost for AJ necessarily, but I think he can cook Baltimore's secondary under any circumstances. Brown has topped 100 receiving yards in 4 different games this season, and I think we're looking at number 5 this week.
All right, let's get to primetime picks. You know what we do here? We snake draft 3 huge games from every single weekend, figure out how the standings will look. And the standings right now, wow. Saquon, 44 points. Andy Behrens with the 68-point week. Not only does he get the win, but look at the total points. Tara's still in first place, but I mean, there's a point total switch here. Absolutely epic. And yeah, fourth place. I don't want to talk about it. All right, so here we go. These are the standings. The games this week. We got Philly, Baltimore, San Francisco, Buffalo, Denver, Cleveland. I continue to eat humble pie. I tell you why I hate pie. And I'm first. And this is what, they always tell you when you play blackjack, they always tell you decide who you're going to beat, right? You either hit on 16 or you don't hit on 16. Like there's no changing your approach. And we all know that every single week that I win, it's because I win with Derrick Henry. And I took him last week and I watched Saquon kick my butt. So I'm going to do what any smart person does right now. And I'm going to cower in fear and change everything that I do. I'm taking Saquon. I'm taking Saquon out of the gates because of recency bias, because I saw it last week, and because I'm hoping he's still hot at the roulette table. So Saquon is my number 1 pick, and I'm immediately saying I'm sorry to Derrick Henry, who has gotten me to the last place standing that I so deserve. Harmon, you're up next. Who you taking?
And I will say thank you very much to Derrick Henry. Why don't you just come on down and join Team Harmon here at pick number 2? Although, I've picked first 80 times in a row, allegedly, according to Fitz. Never had Derrick Henry in this competition, so I'll take him here at this one.
Well, you know what? I'm just trying to make sure you feel good. It's the holidays. I'm spreading Christmas cheer. Andy, give us what you got. Your first pick.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty clear 1, 2, 3 here. I'm going to go A.J. Brown. I just gave you the case for him. Again, pretty clear choice and a terrific matchup against Baltimore. Should be another relatively easy path to 100 yards.
All right, Tara, you get 2 straight because you are, for the 3,000th week in a row, sitting in first place.
That's actually true.
Yeah, being the best is tough. Once again, you guys have literally taken all of the slate breaking players. It's not fair. If I want to, pull out a win, it's tough when I don't get Saquon or Derrick Henry. But this actually makes things pretty easy for me. Obviously, I'm not going to pick from that game, and I'm taking Christian McCaffrey here, drinking my own Kool-Aid that he will finish as the overall RB1 this week. With my second pick here, I'm taking the best option in the Denver-Cleveland matchup with Courtland Sutton. Sutton on fire with Bo Nix. I expect that to continue this week.
That's a really good pick by you. Andy Behrens, you're back. What do you got?
Yeah, listen, I'm terrified of that Denver-Cleveland game. There's not 4 guys that I want in that one, so that's where I'm going. I'm going to take Nick Chubb coming off a 2-touchdown game. Part of me wants to go Jerry Jeudy for the revenge game narrative, but I just think the volume of Chubb is a little bit safer.
All right, Harmon, you're up next.
Fitz, you pointed this out, that Andy is both a fraud and a hypocrite. Your words, not mine. Your words, not mine. Because Tara stuck to her guns and she took CMC. Meanwhile, in that same segment, Andy's like, oh yeah, James Cook, fantasy game changer. And here he is not taking James Cook. So I will happily welcome James Cook to my squad in a snow game here on Sunday night.
Was that your Andy voice? Do that again? Is that your Andy voice, really?
No, I can't do it again. It's not. It just doesn't happen. It's not an on-command thing.
I get 2 straight picks here, and the weather's going to be frightful, and I'm not sure what to do. So I panic pick, and I'm going to take George Kittle here. Look, we know George Kittle's going to get some looks, so I'm panic picking George Kittle, and then hear me out on this. Like, I know in this situation that Jerry Jeudy makes the most sense. I'm just not going to do it because what do we know, frankly, about the ability of the other side? What we know is that there's one great corner for Denver's defense that can absolutely shut anybody down, and they bracket really well. We just saw them take away Brock Bowers a couple of weeks ago in a painful game for me to watch. So I think they put all assets towards taking away the only receiver that Cleveland even has that can be a threat, which means maybe opportunity for Njoku. So I'm just going to desperately heave towards 2 straight tight ends, and then realize that there's a reason I'm in last place. JK asks, Njoku or Ingram? Andy Behrens, make me feel you're nicer about this than Harmon's going to be to me. So Njoku or Ingram, Andy Behrens, make me feel good about it.
Oh yeah, I think you went a good route there. I think I would go Njoku in this situation. It's a little odd to carry 2 tight ends of this quality this late in the season. I think you could probably drop at least one of them for a high upside running back. I would go Njoku there. I think you're going to be playing him the rest of the year, basically.
All right, look at that. Harmon, that means you're up, and you got 1 game left to pick from. So what's it going to be, sir?
Yeah, this is pretty ironic as or at least one of the industry's bigger Jerry Jeudy skeptics for most of his career. But I'm actually I'm relatively happy to take him here. Honestly, I'd feel better about it if Cedric Tillman was going to go, because I think he'd end up getting the Patrick Surtain treatment. This makes me a little nervous to take Jerry Jeudy. There may have been like a tiny, sick, disgusting part of me that was hoping Fitz was going to take him, and then I could take Elijah Moore just to be a total weirdo about this. But I'm going to try to be normal here. I'm just going to take Jerry Jeudy in this spot.
I'll be honest. My big thought this morning was Elijah Moore versus Njoku. Like, I can't believe that that's where this game has taken me. All right, so from one fraud to another. Andy, what do you got? What's your next pick?
Huh. Yeah, seriously. If that doesn't invalidate the entire career of Matt Harmon, I don't know what does. But Harmon taking Jerry Jeudy of all people. His whole brand is not liking Jerry Jeudy. That's outrageous. I'm actually a little bit thrown by the fact that you took Kittle. I would have loved Kittle here. Instead, I'm going to take Juwan Jennings. Ideally, this game would be played under more favorable weather conditions, but we can't have everything. Jennings has very clearly been the top non-Kittle receiving option for the Niners. He's averaging 2.5 yards per route run so far this season. Incredible rate. So he's been a target monster. I'm going to take him in this one.
And then for the 763,000th time in a row, Tara, you get the last pick. Who are you taking?
My Mr. Irrelevant here. Since you guys scraped the Baltimore-Philly game clean, I saved it for last. I'm taking Zay Flowers here. I don't have to give you any analysis because Matt Harmon literally just explained why he is going to have a fantastic week. So I think Matt is 100% right here. Not a fraud. Zay Flowers will win me this week here. Thank you, Matt.
The problem is if Zay
Rooting
Flowers
for you,
has
Tara.
a big
Rooting
week,
for you, Tara.
Harmon's gonna remind us all that this was really his pick. Andy, Tara, take it away. It's time for some fantasy face-off with Jordan Addison.
Yeah, a little fantasy face-off here. The subject is Jordan Addison. He's coming off an annoyingly great game against the Bears in Week 12. Last week, he just took full advantage of the extreme attention that was being paid to Justin Jefferson. You mentioned it earlier, Tara, as well as a pretty remarkable cushion that Chicago gave him throughout the game. But I'm over it. This week, Addison is dealing with a suddenly pretty stingy Arizona defense. So it's not necessarily the best spot for him. Let's consider Addison relative to Michael Pittman. He's coming off one of his best, actually one of his only useful games of the season.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I mean, that's the crux of the issue here, Andy. Josh Downs being out makes this very, very appealing to lean into Michael Pittman. And we did see that improved connection there between him and Anthony Richardson. But I feel like this one comes down to who do I trust more here, Sam Darnold or Anthony Richardson? And clearly at this point, it's Sam Darnold. I feel like the connection can grow there with Anthony Richardson, but Pittman still feels volatile. The big issue here is that he has no ceiling while he's the wide receiver one. It's crazy. His ceiling is just nowhere near what Jordan Addison's can be. So I think I'm going with Jordan Addison here. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, no, I think that's the right way to think about it too. Like if you just need, I don't know, 5 catches for 55 yards, I guess it's fine to go with Pittman. I'm fairly confident he'll give us that. If you don't consider yourself any kind of underdog or it's not a tight matchup, but man, the ceiling in this one is very clearly tied to that. That's got to be Minnesota's offense. That's got to be Addison. You saw his explosiveness last week. So I'd go that route as well. How about Jordan Addison or Brian Thomas Jr., who is actually like the overall wide receiver 14 on the season? I'm not sure how many more games he's going to get this year with Trevor Lawrence, but this week is one of them.
Yeah, hey, we got one here. I feel like, and because we've got one, you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. I feel like I'm throwing caution to the wind, and I am going with Brian Thomas. Maybe it is because I've been reeling from his performances since Trevor went down. I've been suffering as a fantasy manager here, and I'm ready to jump into the first opportunity with some upside here for Brian Thomas. A nice get-right game here where they'll probably be chasing points against the Texans, so volume can maybe finally be in his favor here. So yeah, I feel like I'm going with Brian Thomas on this one, Andy.
Yeah, I lean the same way. This is also one of those situations where we're getting his own team's wide receiver one versus a secondary option for the Vikings, right? Like we all understand the ceiling that you have with Jordan Addison, but the floor is also, 2 or 3 catches in a quiet game. And I don't think we're getting that from Thomas with Trevor Lawrence back. Okay, one more name. Going to be Jordan Addison or the very well discussed on this show, Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy is headed into a true revenge game, and he's been a target magnet, obviously, with Jameis Winston as his quarterback. He's over 70 receiving yards in 4 straight games. What are we doing here?
I'm very, very conflicted on this one. I'm not going to lie. On the one hand, like we've talked about, Jerry Jeudy, clear wide receiver one here, been thriving lately with Jameis Winston. And he has actually been the wide receiver 8 overall with Jameis Winston this season. So it seems like a no-brainer to go with him. But we talked about that matchup with Patrick Surtain literally being the worst that you can ask for. If Tillman was out, or was in, as Matt was saying, I could go the other direction here. But I lean towards Addison in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think just staying away from the Monday night game if you can, if you've got a great option, is probably the way to go. Before we send it back to Fitz and Matt, we're going to take one question from the YouTube chat here. This is from Luis Leon. He's asking Brian Thomas Jr., who we just discussed, or Khalil Shakir.
I lean towards Brian Thomas Jr. Now, Khalil Shakir is the safer option for sure. That there's no mistaking that one. But just the upside and the potential of Brian Thomas Jr., I lean that way on that one.
All right, sounds good. Like it. Let's send it back now to Fitz and Matt.
All right, let's get to some fantasy bench warmers. Guys, you can just stash over there. I know a lot about bench warming. There we go, Harmon. Give us somebody on your mind that's a fantasy bench warmer.
Yeah, look, But before we get into the options here, this is the time of the year, people. All right, that wide receiver 5, you're never going to play again. You're through your bye week gauntlet. Drop them, stash a backup running back. We took a question about 2 tight ends you're debating going forward. Like Andy said, drop one of those dudes and stash a high upside running back. This is the time of the season. This is what the winners are doing right now, and we want you all to be winners. Mathematically, that can't happen, but we're gonna try to make it happen here. First option is Blake Corum. 16% rostered right now in Yahoo leagues, which is shockingly low for a guy that we talked about all summer as kind of one of the better stash candidates throughout the season. But that was the clear thing here. He was always going to be a stash candidate behind Kyren Williams. And I get it. There's not a lot of proof of concept here with Blake Corum. He has cleared double-digit snaps twice all season. Not touches, snaps. He has very rarely seen the field because Kyren Williams never leaves the field. Over the last 4 weeks, Kyren Williams has seen snap totals of 99%, 93%, a paltry 81%. What the hell was going on that week, Kyren Williams? 91% though the game after that. So if anything happens to Williams, a guy who has dealt with injuries in the past, I do think Corum would get elevated to that top running back role. The Rams have a pretty favorable schedule. There's decent matchups down the stretch. So he's definitely somebody that I think should not be 16% or only rostered in 60% of leagues. He should probably be on benches everywhere.
All right, give me another guy that you got your eyes on. I'm going to guess it's another running back.
It is another running back. And this one we do have more of a proof of concept, and I think that's reflected in the roster percentage here. 30% rostered for Ray Davis of the Buffalo Bills. Whereas I don't really know who Blake Corum is. I think my eyeballs tell me that Ray Davis is a baller. I've seen him play in favor of some of these other backs on the roster when James Cook has missed time. Even he's gotten some like relief touches on occasion. He's played extremely well, I think, is Ray Davis. I also think he's a great fit for this Buffalo Bills running game. That runs a lot of duo, they run a lot of gap concepts, and Ray Davis is just a no-nonsense, let's get down the field and let's run with power. Again, he's a great fit for this running scheme in particular. So I actually think that the Bills offense would be a little better off if they get Ray Davis some more standalone touches. But for right now, he is clearly one of the best stashes in the league, because if James Cook misses any time, I think Ray Davis would be a running back 1 in weekly rankings the rest of the way.
Sweet baby Ray. Love him in Kentucky. Love the draft pick. I'm going to love him in Buffalo for a long time. I love the whole group. Let's bring everybody back together and get to some hurry up offense. 25 seconds goes on the clock, and we will answer as many questions as we possibly can. The first one from Weller's Adjacent, which is, by the way, an adorable picture. Superflex, 6-point TD pass, tight end, 1.5 PPR, wide receiver, 1 PPR, running back, 0.2 carry / 0.5 PPR. Need 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, and a super flex. Drake May, Deebo Samuel, Demario Douglas, David Moore, George Kittle, Trey McBride, Bucky Irving, #AskFFL. What do you think, Andy? No, it's 25. Andy, you get the whole time. Go for it.
Take a break, Fitz. You're gonna need it after that one. What a manifesto. You're always starting the quarterback in your super flex. You're gonna start Drake May here. I can't believe Bucky Irving even made it into this question. I'm gonna bench David Moore and I'm gonna bench Demario Douglas. How about that?
Also, I'm going to bench people that make their fantasy football leagues that complicated. Just stop. All right. The next question comes from Wolfpack Love, who says, Amari Cooper, Jawan Jennings, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris. Harmon, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really feel like a lot of conviction one way or another on this one. I think these guys are all rather in the same group, but I'll go with Jawan Jennings. Just hopefully we see more of that volume that we've seen in previous games now that Brock Purdy's back under center.
Jamie Wallace is the next question, and Jamie asks, we're asking Tara, ask FFL, Baker or Burrow? Look at how simple that is.
Yeah, I get it, because Baker Mayfield, man, talk about a dog. Everything, believe in him 100%. I think he'll also have a lot of upside in this matchup, but at the same time, they could just lean on the run game. They've got 3 running backs deep. I lean towards Joe Burrow on this one as the safer option, because Burrow, they're going to be throwing. That defense can't stop anybody, so the volume is going to be there with Burrow for sure.
The next question is from Derek James Robinson. DK at Jets or Lad at Atlanta? # must-win game. Andy Behrens, help him.
Yeah, I'm going to play DK Metcalf here. I'm a longtime DK apologist. I agree with Matt that I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is probably the wide receiver one there, and I have him a little bit higher than Metcalf. But man, Metcalf is such an unsolvable problem. Ladd McConkey's great too. I can't believe that you have to sit one of these options, but for me, this would be Metcalf.
All right, let's get to the YouTube chat. First one comes in from Oakley Sutherland, who says, half PPR, Addison or Cook at flex. Harmon, what do you think?
Like James Cook, I assume, not Dalvin Cook, because we're going with James Cook over Jordan Addison. I get that Addison's coming off this monster performance, but I think a lot of that had to do with the way the Bears are defending Justin Jefferson. Obviously, teams are going to do that a lot, but that seems a little bit more fluky. James Cook, pretty locked in starter.
Frankie J in the YouTube chat gets an award for the emoji use. He uses the siren emoji and the timer emoji. Must win week, need to bench one, standard scoring. JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rashad White, Brian Thomas Jr. What do you think, Tara?
Oh, man. I think I would go with Rashad White on that one. His upside is, while he gets rushing touchdowns, upside is through the air there. Rashad White's the one that I would bench.
Okay, and then the next question comes from Calm Rage 10. Feels right. Chat, I'm very wary of playing DK against the Jets D. Should I start him, Evans, Dell, or Leggett? I'll ask Harmon, since we've already heard some good things, just so I can see if I can make mommy and daddy fight again. What do you think, Harmon?
It's not 2022, 2023 anymore. We don't got to be scared of that Jets defense. Again, I don't think it's looked like they've been playing all that hard of late, so I'm not afraid of playing DK Metcalf in this matchup. And some of those other options, I would not be considering like Leggett or anything like that over DK Metcalf. I know that JSN's on the rise, as I mentioned earlier, but like Andy said, and look, Andy Behrens, not a total fraud, not a total goofball. He's right. They can coexist.
Man, I feel like I've just made America come together. Okay, we'll go back to Behrens on this one. Raziel 820, always love Raziel in the chat, says, forgot to take Keenan Allen out of my lineup Thursday. Now can only pick one. Please help. McLaurin or Evans, half PPR. Love you guys. What do you think, Andy?
How'd that work out for you, forgetting to take Keenan Allen out of the lineup? Not a bad bit of forgetfulness right there. So good on you. I'd play Mike Evans here. It's really close. Love Terry McLaurin, but man, Evans against Carolina has been a gift over the years, and I think it's going to be a gift this week.
All right, we will go to Tara with the next one. The next one comes from Boom. I don't really know. It just was fun. Boom. Mooney, Jennings, or Chubb in flex, Tara?
Oh, my boy Darnell Mooney here. Wide receiver 2, yes, but the upside has been wide receiver 1 quite frequently here. It could be good with Jennings if it weren't for the weather there. That makes it a little bit riskier. So the safer option for me is to go with Mooney. Not that I dislike Chubb here, just a lot higher upside there potentially for Mooney in this matchup.
Adorable profile picture for Boom. I want to pet that dog. All right, the next one is Nate Gunderson. Can I pet that dog? Taysom Hill or Cade Otton for my tight end. It seems every time I start to buy into Hill, he puts up a dud. Andy Behrens, defend it. What do you think?
Well, what did Cade Otton do the last time you saw him? Also a dud with Mike Evans back in the mix. I'm gonna play Taysom Hill. I mean, he has a ceiling that is unlike any other player at the tight end position. He's not a true tight end, but whatever. He's gonna get 5-6 carries.
All right, the next question comes from Ed Mansilla, who says, ask FFL, AJ Brown, London, Metcalf, Leggett, Ridley, Sutton, need 3, Harmon.
Ooh, some great options here. Well, AJ Brown, obviously, I think Drake London is an obvious play as well. And, I will go Courtland Sutton over DK Metcalf, though. That volume has been great for Sutton. I would not have expected myself to say this, but him and Bo Nix, kind of one of my favorite connections to watch right now.
Look at that. All right, Colin Thompson with the next one. Says PPR, need 1. Debo, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz, Tank Bigsby, Elijah Moore. Thanks. Ask FFL. What do you think, Tara?
Colin, I 100% get this. I feel this with the Debo shares there, but we still got to go with Debo over all of those guys. I mean, Ertz is the only one that has really shown any level of consistency, but I just can't make the argument for starting him over Debo. I would go ahead and start Debo on this one.
I like Colin's contemplative profile picture, too. It's a very album-worthy. Kim S. says, ask FFL, 3 leagues, all half PPR. Higgins, Jennings, or Pickens flex. Disley or Ingram. Otton or Ingram. Juwan Jennings or BTJ. Thanks. Andy, you follow all that? Give him in.
I think I do. There's not going to be a lot of time for analysis here. I'm going to go George Pickens for sure in the flex. I think we need to split our Ingrams, and I will play him over Will Dissly, but I will not play him over K-Dot here. Good matchup. And give me BTJ in the last one.
Let's get another YouTube chat. By the way, good job by you getting all that in. Chris Pittman, Ask FFL. Chris is 911 of the week. Half PPR, Ramondre Stevenson, Chubb, or Gus Edwards. Help me make the playoffs. Tara, help him make the playoffs.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I know Ramondre Stevenson has been frustrating. It is a good matchup there for him. I lean towards him slightly over Nick Chubb in this one for a nice bounce back game after a disappointing performance last week.
All right, so here's what you need to know about next week. I know you're only thinking about today, but you need to know that next week we are back to 6 bye weeks. So you need us more than ever going into next week because everybody's out and you're going to be in a must-win situation. We're going to be back Thursday night ahead of Packers-Lions, obviously, to kick off the week. And be sure you're checking out all of our great content out on Yahoo Sports and Yahoo Fantasy. In the meantime, for everybody behind the scenes that works their tails off, Andy Roberts. See, this is what I do every week. Tera Roberts gets a new last name every week. Matt Harmon, and then Andy Roberts Barrett, apparently. That's the way we're going to do it. I'm Jason Fitz. Thank you so much for watching Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks.